You all remember that freaky image of that thing that was caught on a trail cam that kind of looked like a skinless demon? It was floating around the internet for a while, super popular a couple years ago. People were equating it to the rake. Yeah, that thing's real. At least in Norway, according to Reddit. Now I know what you are all saying, but Wendy, the rake is a creepypasta. It is not real. Trust me, I don't want it to be. I wanted to move to Sweden. The first time I heard about this thing was in one of those glorious Ask Reddit mega threads that pop up from time to time about what's the creepiest thing you've ever seen. Yeah, I kind of go down the rabbit hole whenever one of those pops up. Kind of disappear for 3 days. Anyway, I'll read for you the original post and then one of the most interesting responses. Bear in mind I've edited this very slightly for grammar and to shorten it just a. The original poster, Lyda Gulliter, stated, "This took place in March to April of 2013. Me and a friend had just been to the movies and were walking around at around 10:45 p.m. We decided we would take a shortcut through the schoolyard of our old school, which had since been abandoned and was in pretty bad shape. As we walked through the schoolyard, we decided to try to get inside the school building and explore a little bit. Now, the school consists of 2 wings, so the building is an L shape if viewed from above. It is 3 stories tall and has 3 entrances. The main entrance leads into a kind of main hall which connects the 2 wings. Each wing has staircases in each end of the corridors which lead to the different floors. This is important later. One of the windows right by the entrance to the lower wing was actually wide open so we could easily get in. We were now in the basement. We used our cell phones as flashlights and made sure not to point them towards the windows to avoid being seen. Even though the building was not in use, there was still a lot of stuff left lying around. Musical equipment, uniforms, a pool table, chairs, etc. So we were just exploring each room in the basement to see if we could find anything cool. We explored the basement for about 15 minutes before we headed up to the first floor, and we were now in the main hall. There was some kind of tarp or large plastic sheet hanging there to separate the hall and the lower wing for some reason. I assume it was for some kind of construction work. We went down one of the corridors and started exploring the classrooms. Every classroom had been either vandalized or suffered some kind of water damage, so everything was pretty broken down and rotting. In hindsight, I think we were lucky the floors didn't collapse on us or something. We had just come out of the 3rd classroom and were in the corridor when we heard something moving, the tarp plastic sheet thing in the main hall. This was not wind or anything. We could definitely tell someone was physically moving it. We could also hear footsteps, although the rhythm of the steps was kind of weird. It sounded like someone changed their walking pace sporadically, if that makes any sense. We immediately went inside a classroom to hide, as we thought someone had called security on us. We hid behind the door in the classroom for about 2 minutes, dead quiet. We didn't hear anything else during this time, so we figured it had to be the wind or just random noises. We decided to keep going. We went through the corridor and up the stairs and the other end from the main hall and explored the 2nd floor. While we were there, we would occasionally hear some noises, but we just brushed it off as the wind. After a while, we had explored the rest of the corridor, and we decided to walk down the staircase that led from the 2nd floor to the hall. Halfway down the staircase, there is this plateau before the 2nd set of stairs, and this is where things took a turn, no pun intended. We could see the plastic from there, and it was moving. It was some kind of creature. It was skinny, almost completely naked. At least I couldn't see any clothes. And had really thin strands of hair and was really pale. Like corpse pale, almost completely white. The first thing that came to mind was that this thing looked like Gollum, just bigger. It was crouching down and was scratching the floor or something, and it made some weird, growly, groany, breathy noises. It was facing away from us, so I just stood frozen for a good while and watched it. I took a step back and just pointed at this thing and looked at my friend. He peeked around the corner, and immediately I could see his facial expression change into a combination of horror and shock. It was reassuring in a way, knowing that he saw it too. We just stood there for a good 20 seconds, just watching this thing doing whatever it was doing. And the most cliché horror movie thing happened. My friend started backing away slowly, and while doing so, stepped on a piece of glass that cracked. This startled the creature, and it quickly looked over its shoulder right at me. I just bolted at that point. We ran all the way to the basement to get out, and the whole way, I swear, it felt like it was right behind us. We ran back to my friend's house, and when we got there, we had a kind of debriefing session, making sure we both saw the same thing. The closest thing to a reference picture I can find is this. It pretty much looked exactly that, just with thin strands of hair on its head. I understand if you think I'm bull. I would be skeptical if someone else told this story, but I swear this actually happened, and my friend confirms it to this day. We got a good enough look at it to confirm that it was a humanoid creature of some sort, but it didn't really resemble a human being. The only explanation I can think of is that it was a homeless dude that for some reason was naked in this abandoned school. But this is in northern Norway during the winter. You wouldn't survive very long without clothes. Also, I live in a very small town with very few, if any, homeless people, so that theory wouldn't really make sense. It could also be some kind of animal that had found its way inside, but we got a good look at it, and it didn't resemble any animal I've seen before. I have no idea what that thing was. I am normally a rational, Occam's razor kind of person, but we saw what we saw, and I have no explanation for it. This was followed by a reply from Make Believe Land, who claimed to have seen the same thing, stating, "I know exactly what you were talking about. I've seen it too. I live in Sweden and lived in the same middle-of-nowhere forest all my life. When I lived in our main house, I could hear someone walking past my window at night, but everyone said that I was just imagining it, until my boyfriend also heard it one night. But you could never see any footprints or evidence that someone had actually been outside my room. A couple of weeks later, I went out to smoke in the middle of the night. It had been snowing pretty hard, and in combination with the moon, you could see just as clearly as during the day. For some reason, I looked around the corner and saw it. That tall, creepy, golem-like figure. I immediately ran inside and called my boyfriend and told him what I had seen, and the freaky part is that he knew exactly what I was talking about, because there's a thread about this creature on a site called Flashback, and at this time I had never visited the site. This was back in 2010. I'm not completely sure that I have seen it again after this. Last year I woke up in the middle of the night and saw this creature, but in another form, short and fat, but just shook it off since I had been sleeping and since I always lock my door. But when I was going to work, I just opened the door. It hadn't been locked during the night. I know. Hal is always telling me, Wendy, don't believe everything you read on Reddit. I feel like this is the second time we've had this conversation. Anyway, yes, I know. They could very well be lying, and I do like to suspend my belief for these threads because it makes it a lot more fun. If you take the posts at face value, we can possibly learn a little bit more. Now, the names that are mentioned if you read through the conversation are Kvasi, Qvasi, and Trull, Trul. Apparently these creatures and these names don't come from any kind of local or Norse mythology, but rather we're referred back to that Flashback website that was mentioned in the response. So I plugged it into Google Translate to read more of this juicy cryptid goodness, and there are a surprising amount of sightings mentioned in that thread. The interesting thing is the way these creatures are described in the Flashback website is a little bit different. They're described as more of a ball with really long legs and often very hairy. They're almost always seen during the winter in forests. The original poster of the Flashback forum thread mentioned in one particular sighting they were able to hear the creature's footsteps crunch on the snow. However, when they later went to investigate, shortly after seeing the creature, there were no footprints or any physical evidence left behind of any kind. I tried to do some more searching about the Kvasi and the troll, but came up empty-handed. And after reading through the Flashback thread, I realized why. In the thread, it was mentioned that these creatures almost looked a bit hunchback, and people started calling them Quasimodo, but spelled it with a V. They ended up calling them Kvasi for short, as in Quasi, as in Quasimodo. As for troll, I believe that it is actually meant to be troll, as in the troll that we all know of from Scandinavian lore. In fact, it seemed like most people on the thread actually believed that this was the identification of the creature. So that brings up all kinds of questions. So then, are trolls real, and are these rake-like creatures actually trolls? And then, do trolls exist in all areas of the world? Some interesting points about trolls, and there's a lot of information to cover, so I'll probably do a more in-depth video on trolls in the future. But they come in multiple sizes, like was mentioned in the response to the post on Reddit. They are also more likely to be seen by women, apparently in the forest at night in the winter. Historically, the description of the troll actually varies quite a bit depending on the source, but in general, they're vaguely humanoid of some nature, tend to dwell in out-of-the-way places, and are either unhelpful or downright dangerous to humans. So do you live in a Scandinavian country, and have you seen one of these troll rake things crawling around in your woods, or your abandoned school? We want to know about it. Leave us a comment below. Also, don't forget to subscribe because we will be releasing a very, very special Halloween special, especially for you, especially on Halloween. Hopefully, if everything works out. Thank you so much for watching, my Go-Go's. I hope this has inspired you to go out and try to find more cryptids that you haven't heard of, that may or may not have real sightings, as stated by a random stranger on the internet. This has been the Wendigo A Go-Go Show, signing out. The original poster, Lida Golider? Lida Golider? Lida Letogolator, stated, I can't talk. I feel like everything's falling apart.